So let's look at why dynamic intelligence and how it provides the foundational tools for organizations to thrive in complexity. So there's been various frameworks or lenses proposed through which we can view and model and approach our realities to the world. Most of you will be familiar with the VUCA framework: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That's been around for a long time now. It was first used by the US Army War College in 1987, published by a chap named Herbert Barber in 1991. Since then, not a lot changed until 2020, when a futurologist known as Jermaine Cascio published a paper where he proposed that actually a better way, a different way that we could look at the way the world is now or then in 2020 is through the lens of what he called BANI, brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Since then, Dr. Sanjeev Dixit last year proposed that we could look at it through a lens of disruptive, brutal, chaotic, and restless, DBCR. And those of you from an HR background might recognize that name, as that's the domain that he sits in. He's an influencer in the HR space. And we'll see whether that takes off and whether the management publications start picking that up. But whichever four-letter acronym you use, they're all underpinned by the principles of complexity and the uncertainty that brings about. And then in response to that, then various leadership models have been proposed to deal with the complexity and uncertainty, starting with situational, and that builds upon basic leadership styles such as laissez-faire, autocratic, and the rest of it. And it's focused primarily on how leaders interact with their teams. So it's more of a kind of team level flexibility. Adaptive leadership broadened the scope of that flexibility to include changes in the organization and external factors. So the leader was encouraged to change the way that they were according to those factors. Dynamic leadership broadens this further because it includes flexibility in the identity of the leaders themselves. In other words, they're able to change who they are and how they respond to the world based on the needs of the environment at the time. So in the moment. According to Lori Mazan, who's the author of Leadership Revolution, who proposed this form of leadership, this dynamic leadership, they can do this for a number of reasons. They can do it because they understand the relationship between their internal experience and the external environment. For any of you that are familiar with Kegan's work, you could say that they hold their relationships as objects rather than being subjects to them. That puts them higher up on the Kegan scale of adult development. They operate on a feedback loop. They scan the current situation both from an internal and external perspective. They look for strategies to address that, and then they reflect on the impact of their decisions and act accordingly. They can operate effectively in environments filled with uncertainty through pattern recognition. Yeah, they're non-binary thinkers. They're able to balance information processing capabilities, weighing principles and facts, big pictures, details, long-term, short-term, and all of the other opposites, if you like, and they do this with curiosity and intellectual humility. So they're curious and skeptical, and they don't assume that they know everything. They're actively motivated to be flexible in all aspects. They seek challenges, seeking balance rather between their own interests plus those of the organization and its people and their stakeholders. And this enables them to act in the face of fear, move forward despite challenges, and respond with and act with agility. In short, they're cognitively and behaviorally complex and have what we would call high dynamic intelligence. So this is all well and good, but what does focusing on dynamic intelligence and creating dynamic intelligence leaders offer? Well, it increases the cognitive complexity. of the individuals and of the organization as a whole, as we'll talk about in a little while. It improves employee engagement and retention. It drives smarter, more effective decision-making. It allows an alignment between developmental strategies and business outcomes. And a whole lot more. And we're not going to talk about, we'll talk about those 4 things in this session today. But in addition, you can think about things like improvements in organizational agility, improvements in innovation, change management, cultural stewardship, ethical practices, sustainability, and ultimately the impact that the organization has.